with Dr. Phil. I won't spend too much time introducing Dr. Phil outside of saying that, you know, Dr. Phil has done a lot of work with us in the past with our high performance squads, and it's a real honour to have him here to give this broader presentation. And as an eminent sports psychologist in this field and understanding performance, we're really excited. So just a couple of housekeeping items for everybody. As we asked through the email, if you can keep your device on mute, that way with 50 or 100 people's background noises, we don't have all the ancillary noise going through. We will be recording the session, and we will be obviously providing an opportunity for you to ask questions. So if you're on the platform, use the chat function on your platform down the bottom to list any questions, and Sam or Tani or Mel may ask that question of Phil, or alternatively, we'll be able to have an opportunity for people to ask questions at the end. Thank you, everybody. Dr. Phil, I'll hand over to you.
Thanks for putting up with me. People, I have to warn you, those who haven't heard me before, is that I am very unusual as a psychologist. What I mean by that is that I've noticed a lot of people have mentioned that they're worried about things like anxiety and confidence. I have a rule: if you can't see it, you can't fix it. Has anybody here ever seen an anxiety? What color is it? How much does it weigh? Anybody ever seen a confidence? So what I talk about, and you mentioned I'm a sports psychologist. Actually, I don't call myself that anymore. I call myself a performance psychologist. See, sports psychologists worry about getting your mind right, making sure that you're focused and all that sort of stuff. I have 50 years clinical experience in psychology. I have 4 degrees, including a doctorate. And I can't control my mind, and I can't control my emotions. So what chance do you have? For example, let's assume I'm angry at somebody. I have absolutely no control over that anger. I didn't ask for it. It may be false, may be real. What I do have control is my reaction to it. So I can give them a fork, say, up yours, and that makes things worse. Or I can say, good day. Or let's assume that somebody's got a job that I think I deserved, and I think they backstabbed to get it. Can I control feeling jealous? Absolutely not. What I can control is deciding what to say. I can say, you backstabbing bastard, and everybody says, thank heavens, we didn't give the job to Phil. Or I can say, listen, I really thought I was going to get the job, really thought it was better for the job. How can I help you? And so what I teach is called the power of positive doing, that no matter how we feel, we can always do what works for us. Now, I'm going to talk a lot tonight about plan A and plan Z. Now, my plan A, which works for me, plan Z doesn't. My plan A is speak quickly, tell really bad jokes. For example, why'd the guy call his girlfriend Hinges? She's something to adore. Why'd the guy get rid of his vacuum cleaner? Because it sucked. Now, let's imagine that I've had a really, really bad day today. Let's assume my wife had picked on me. I always tell people when my wife and I got married, we had something in common. She loved me and I loved me. Let's assume the dog bit me. Does that stop me speaking quickly, telling bad jokes? Absolutely not. For example, about 18 years ago, my son Timothy was 18 at the time, was playing indoor soccer. He broke his elbow, got it rewired, and he's come down the steps at home, and we have carpeted steps here, and he slipped, twisted, picked up his elbow, hit a pot plant, severed his kidney. ICU. Fortunately, a rhinologist saved his kidney, but I was running this 2-day course. And I was talking about Timothy, but I was speaking quickly, telling bad jokes. And somebody says, how can you be so upbeat with your son in hospital? I said, would it help Timothy for me to downbeat? Well, no. Would it help me to be downbeat? No. Would it help you for me to downbeat? No. So I should be downbeat. Well, everybody knows when you don't feel good, you can't act good. Now, if you believe that, I got some swampland to sell you at low tide. And so what happens is people believe you can't act good unless you feel good. So I said to these people, let's imagine you're sitting here in the audience and life sucks so much that you need 3 straws. You're so depressed and a fire breaks out. And you know, if you don't leave, you're going to die an excruciating, horrible death. I said, how many of you would say, well, I would leave, but I'm depressed? I have to wait till I feel better. You can see the looks in their faces. Of course, they leave right away. But so let's be positive. I tell you, I've got a bar of gold bullion for each one of you outside, but you got to get it with 120 seconds. How many of you would say, well, I would get it, but I'm depressed? I'll wait for a minute. So this myth that you have to feel good to act good has been perpetuated by many psychologists and others over the years, that if you don't feel good, somehow you don't have certain skills. I get asked by journalists, how can that football player play with all those off-field issues? Say, what skills doesn't he have? Can he run, tackle, chase? What doesn't he have? But he feels bad. Now, my dad was a psychologist. Many, many years ago, a man came and said, oh, Dr. Jauncey, I've fallen out of love with my wife. I want to divorce her. My dad said, fine. What I want you to do for the next 5 days, do something special for wife every day. Like what? Take her out to eat, buy some flowers. On the 6th day, we'll talk about divorce. He came back on the 6th day, said, Dr. Jauncey, I'm embarrassed. My dad said, why? I've fallen in love with my wife. See what had happened? He was waiting to feel romantic, to act romantically. But he got it wrong. It's when you act romantically, you feel romantic. So in sport, you don't have to feel good to act good, but when you act good, it feels good. My kids, when they're young, said, oh, Daddy, I don't feel like studying. I said, that's great. I don't feel like feeding you. And they studied. See, I didn't care how they felt. I cared where they studied. You've only got to send your kids to school once in their pajamas and they're ready on time. So we have this idea that unless you feel good, you can't perform. And so what I'm teaching people is don't ever try to control the uncontrollables. Now, as I said, I can't control my emotions and I can't control my thoughts. So why try? So if I said, look, for example, if I was feeling bad right now, does that stop me speaking quickly, telling bad jokes? Absolutely not. So when you're in the saddle, and sometimes when you ride well, and sometimes you ride different, which skills don't you have when you're not confident? Which skills don't you have when you're anxious? And I'll talk about that later on. Anxiety is just fuel, which is really good. You don't want to get rid of that. And people would say, but oh, no, no, no. And they say something that I really hate. Now, I talk a lot about winners and losers. Now, winners don't necessarily win, but they're doing the best they can. So in life, this is the old teacher educator in me, we used to talk about aims and goals. An aim is why you do something, but you can't always control that. Everybody here has performed well and lost. And that's an aim. Grant Hackett a few years ago broke a world record and came second to a guy named Thorpe. Now, if you break a world record, have you failed? No. His aim was to win, but his goal was to swim as best as he could, and he achieved that. And you're never a failure when you achieve your goal, because you can do everything right and things go wrong. And in sport, we talk about disappointment and regret. Grant Hackett had disappointment but no regret, because he swam the best race he could, but he lost. But we've all experienced regret where we know we did not perform at the level that we could perform. And that's regret, where we didn't do things. For example, tonight, my aim is that after this session, say, Phil really helped us. But I can't guarantee that. Somebody say, listen, we've already sold our cow, so I have no use for your bull now. Someone said, why should we listen to that old dinosaur? So I can't guarantee my aim, but what I can do is, after talking to groups like you in the past, it was a bit unusual for me because I don't usually do it on Zoom, but I've said, when I talk about these things, people at the end of the session said that helped me. Now, I haven't failed if I don't achieve my aim, but I have failed if I don't talk about those things that I found help you. And so that's my goal tonight. My goal tonight is that after I finish, I've taught you how your brain works. Because remember, the best coach you ever get is yourself. Because we can always deal with ourselves. Now remember, we all hate liars, but who's the biggest liar we ever meet? Ourselves. So we've got to be honest with ourselves. So tonight, what I want to talk about is how we can be winners. Now, winners never say, if only. See, I would not be saying, if only it was a Thursday night. If only I was talking on Zoom. If only my mates would call me moths. That's a mosquito buzzing around, make a lot of noise, no sense. Because they're all true. So the only time somebody says if only when it's not true. Now, when I say if only, what I'm saying is if only things were different, I'd be okay, which means I feel great about failing now because I don't feel good. You see, I don't always feel like a loving husband and a loving dad, but I can always act that way. Nothing ever stops me acting like a loving husband, loving dad. I don't have to wait to feel like it. I can do it. And so what happens, I find people don't understand the way the brain works. See, I would never say to somebody, you're undisciplined, you have a bad attitude, or you're lazy. Firstly, to say that, you have to be perfect. And I looked in the mirror, there's no St. Phil. But secondly, what I found is that you can't talk about those things because I've never seen it. So rather than you're undisciplined, have a bad attitude, lazy, I say, listen, I noticed 2 out of 3 things you haven't done. You haven't done 4 or 6 things. You're taking 7 times longer than something else. So rather than say I have depression, I say you're depressing. See, life's like being on a water ski, on a motorboat. The last thing you want the motorboat to do is stop, because when it stops, you sink. So depressing is stopping. So if I don't like stopping, I can start going. I can't stop myself doing. I'm sorry, I can't stop myself feeling, but I can always make myself do. I had this squash player years ago, and she said, oh, Dr. J, I get so depressed in between games. I can't be positive. I said, listen, I want you to get a doll's mirror and make the ugliest face you can in the mirror. Because you can't feel bad when you do that. She said it worked so well that she actually did it during games. She'd look at the other girl when she made a mistake, went, and what her brain said, oh, you're not acting bad, you want to feel good. She got in the top 10 in the world simply by acting positively. So what you need to do is you need to understand where your brain works. And that's what I want to do is in the next 40 minutes or so, I want to show you how your brain works and how your brain sometimes self-sabotages. Now, again, rather than saying if only, I always say only if. Only if I do what when Timothy's in hospital and I'm feeling down, can I act positively. Only if I do what when I have a problem, make a potentiality. Only if I do what when I have an obstacle, making an opportunity. And the way we've been made, our brain says, whenever you're trying to fix a problem, I'll help you do better. But if you're not trying to fix a problem, you want to fail, I'll help you self-sabotage. So there's 3 basic things about the brain to help you understand this. Now, the first one, I ask people, why do you get bad thoughts? And they look at me puzzled. I don't know. It's like some athletes, they say, oh, some days you know when you're in the zone. Now, I've never seen a zone, don't know what colors, don't know maze. And, you know, I could tell after 5 minutes, I wasn't in the zone. So I said, what was it? Like the cricketer, I couldn't see the ball. Were you blind? You know, and people have all these statements. But you see, there is no zone. There is, did you do what works for you or you did not? And so the first thing about the brain is our slave. And it says, master, I will only do what you want me to do. So how does the brain work it out? It works out from our actions. And I call this the front desk secretary of the brain. Now I talk to footballers, so I call it's technically called the brain stem reticular formation, but they wouldn't understand. So let's imagine I'm your secretary and I give you a message for Fred Blogs and you don't ring it. And I give you another message, Fred Blogs, you don't ring it. I give you a third message, Fred Blogs, you ring somebody else, I'll stop giving you the message. And that's the way the brain works. The brain says, master, if I give you a thought and you act on that thought, I'll make the thought louder. But if I give you a thought and you don't act on that thought, I'll make it softer. So if you get in icy cold water and the brain says, get out, it's cold, but you keep swimming. The brain says, you idiot, get out, it's cold, and you keep swimming. The brain says, you moron, get out, it's cold, and you keep swimming. The brain says, master, you don't know what about the cold, and it turns off the temperature. It's not warm, not cold, just turns it off. But if you get out right away, put your toe back in the water feels colder. If every time I pick up my phone and I pick up a cigarette, as soon as the phone rings, it's master, you need nicotine. Master, you need nicotine. But every time I pick up the phone and pick up a carrot, it says, Master, you need carotene. Master, you need carotene. Now people say, no, nicotine's far. No, it's the same. That's where mistakes come from. See, I cannot make mistakes you guys make on horses. You know why? I've never practiced on horses. Every mistake you've made, you practiced, which is good, because if you don't want to make a mistake, don't practice it. See, I never accidentally swear in Russian because I don't speak Russian. Or if I'm a sailor and I swear all the time and use the F word, I'll use that word in church when I become a priest. The brain says, oh, you should know. The brain says you use it all your life. If an intimate moment with my wife, I use the wrong name, what's she going to know? I've been practicing with somebody else. And so the brain is our master. It just says, Master, I only look at what you do. So for example, you ladies, you put on some more perfume because you think it's worn off. And we say, no, you smell like a perfume factory. Or I say, hi, you say, oh, Phil, you pong, the paint's peeling off the wall. Now, why can't we smell it? People say you're used to it. No, ladies, when you put on perfume, what reaction do you make? You go, pasang, impulse. You make no reaction. So the brain says, since you're not reacting to the smell, you don't want it. How many of us guys go, we don't do that. So the brain says you don't want to hear song. You go to a party. You can't hear anything, suddenly hear your name. Because your brain says your name's important. Or mom's the only one at the party that hears the baby cry because it's her baby. And so the brain works in that way. It continually says, do you need it? For example, you get a new car, you see the car on the road. And so the brain is always looking for, how do you react? Now I tell people I like to watch my weight so I can keep it where I watch it. And I used to go bike riding. I broke my wrist a couple years ago, so I'm now down to 40. I used to go about 80K on my push bike every weekend. And my brain would say, as soon as I go out after 1K, oh, you're too old for this. Heart's thump, thump, thump. Everything telling me to slow down, slow down, slow down. And I pedal harder. Now at the end of 80K, I'm less tired than one. That makes no sense. I have more lactic acid, dehydration, fatigue. But I told the brain, I'm not going to act tiredly. You've all had the same thing. You train. After 10 minutes, you're knackered. 2 hours later, you're less tired. That's because you told the brain, and that's why you train. You don't want to tire. But if I've got off after 1 kilometer, go, oh, I'm so tired. Oh, I'm so tired. Then the brain would have made you get off sooner and made me more tired. And so that's the way the brain works. It's also in the reverse. You younger riders, when you go into an event, you'll see far more than the experienced riders. For example, I've only ever played social cricket, but I've worked with international teams from Australia, New Zealand, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka. And if a bowler bowls the ball to me, I'll actually see far more than a good batsman. You say, why? Well, the batsman said, I've only worried about the fingers, the bounce, and the seam. I'm looking at elbows, everything else. I'm a backyard mechanic, but if I get with a good mechanic under my bonnet and looking something under the bonnet, he'll hear far less than me. So likewise, the experienced riders, when you're looking at a course, you'll see far less because you're only looking at those things that are relevant to you. Whereas the younger riders don't know that. A Darren Lockyer in football would have seen far less than a young footballer on the field. So that's the first stage of the brain. The brain says, Master, I don't know how you want to feel, but if you act badly, I'll make you more bad. For example, about 20 years ago, I was running this 2-day course for St. George Bank in Sydney. And I had to stay overnight over in Sydney because I was down there. And my stomach said it hated me. And from about 10 to 4, had vomiting, diarrhea, and it only stopped about 4 o'clock with nothing left to come out. And the next morning when I got there, all my instincts, I'll stand up, all my instincts said, stand on your heels, tell everybody I'm feeling sick. See, that's actually made me sick right now. So what do? I leaned forward and said, hey, people, last night, 2 orifices in overflow, had the Hershey squirts. Did you hear about the cross-eyed teacher? Couldn't control her pupils. Now, within seconds, my body stopped feeling sick. Because my brain said, do you want to feel sick? Then act sickly. If you don't want to feel sick, don't act sickly. That squash player, if you want to act depressedly, I'll give you depression. If you don't want to act depressedly, I won't. Does that make sense? So if you don't want to feel bad, don't act badly. So if somebody says, when I'm confident, I ride in this way. When I'm not confident, I ride in this way. If you're not confident, what should you do? Go back to A, shouldn't you? It's pretty simple stuff. So this takes us to the second rule. And this is where I have a lot of hassles with my colleagues, because they talk about conditions. Conditions like anxiety, confidence, depression, stress, all those things. Now, I call those invented diseases. Now, what's the difference between a real disease and an invented disease? A real disease, you could not go to a doctor and get medication. I couldn't go to a doctor and say, I think I've got cancer and give me drugs. I think I've got multiple sclerosis, got drugs. When I broke my wrist, can you just put a cast on it? And all those cases, they need evidence. And the reason for that, to fix a problem, you need to know the cause. Because if you don't have the cause, you can't have a cure. But if I go to a doctor and say, listen, my marriage is breaking up, I'll leave with medication. But there's nothing wrong with me. So why they do that? Well, see, what happens is with invented diseases or conditions, since there's absolutely no reason for it, you can't fix it. So all you can give is palliative care. And this is what I call the purpose of pain. If I'm walking my office here barefoot and I step on a thumbtack, it's really good I get excruciating pain, isn't it? Because the brain, it says, master, if you keep doing it, it's going to get worse. So all pain is really good. It's like if I have a fire in my office and the alarm goes off, which do I turn off first? I turn off the fire, don't I? No, 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 no. If you have an invented disease, for example, talking about invented disease, you've all heard about ADD or ADHD. I would have had it when I was young, but fortunately for me, it wasn't invented to 1986. So when I acted up, they said, oh, Phil misbehaves when he gets bored. So when he gets bored, give him more work to do. I didn't want more work to do. I stopped misbehaving. Well, nowadays it's, oh, he's got a condition. Let's give him Ritalin and make him feel better. Now that doesn't improve my performance, but gets rid of the pain. Or for those people who know about cars, you have a differential that stops the back wheels going at the same speed. If the differential is making noise, now in engines, noise is pain. Now the last thing I want a mechanic to do is put a couple of banana peels into the engine. So the fact is, if I'm having troubles with my marriage breaking up, what's my brain saying? Master, the way you're handling it is not working. It's making it worse. Before I mentioned about depressing. Everybody here is depressed, correct? Now, how does it feel? I was talking to this group of girls up in Toowoomba a couple of years ago, teenage girls. Boys don't do this. The girls love to sulk. So when somebody's insulted them, oh, woe is me, and they get gravel rash on their lips. And they sit in the room and they sulk and sulk. Now remember what we said. The brain says if you act sulkingly, what's it going to do? It makes the sulking pressure sound louder. So I said to the girls, how did it feel while you're sulking? Bad. So why did you sulk? She insulted me, but she's gone. So how long did you sulk? For 3 days. Okay. So why weren't you sulking on the 4th day? Well, you can't stay there all your life. So why did you sulk on the 3rd day? I didn't feel better yet. Did you feel better when you stopped sulking? Still in the room? No. Once they stopped sulking, the brain gives them less sulking feelings. In other words, what the brain says, master, if you want to act badly, I will give you more bad feelings. If you want to act well, fix it. Now, sadly, if you have a real disease, if I go to a doctor saying my knee's hurting, he will actually give me more pain. Now, why is he doing it? Is he being cruel? Or especially physios, they just find that spot. Now, why do they do that? They're not doing it to be cruel. They're doing it, if we can find the pain, we can find the reason for it, so we can help you put in strategies and make it better. Now, if I go to a doctor and say I'm depressing, he said, oh, this is a condition. And since there's no cause for it, we'll actually give you, tell you to stop work. I said, that's going to stop more. Don't worry. I'll give an antidepressant so you can't feel it. See, if somebody put an anesthetic in my foot with a thumbtack, that's not helping me because I leave the thumbtack there. So when I was acting angrily, when I was acting jealously, it felt bad. So my brain said, Master, don't do that. When you're acting anxiously, when that girl was acting depressionally, the squash player, it didn't feel better. So the brain says, anytime I give you pain, it's important that you embrace it and say, the way I'm working isn't working. Does that make sense? So it's very, very important that you never worry about trying to get rid of the emotion. The important emotions, for example, in Rio de Janeiro, the coaches said we could see that the swimmers, Campbell sisters, were anxious and they weren't going to swim well. Now, in fact, anxiety is just fuel. I'll talk more about this in a minute. So they had more fuel. Now, they were thinking, if only I wasn't anxious, I could swim well. What they should have said is only if I do what when I'm feeling anxious can I act in a way that turn that around. Does that make sense? I had this 13-year-old girl, track and field runner, come to me. And when people come to me, they're always in pain. Nobody comes to me and they say, listen, I feel great about my marriage. I feel great about my business. I feel great about my sport. Whenever anybody comes to me, they're saying, I'm in pain. What that tells this performance psychologist is that what you're doing is not working. You need to change what you're doing. Anyway, this girl came to me and I said, why are you here? She says, oh, I get really nervous. I said, that's just fuel. See, the fuel in your car is really good, isn't it? But you just don't take a match to it. But the last thing you do is say, because I'm worried about my fuel being lit by a match, I reduce my fuel tank. Imagine saying to my coach, hey, coach, I reduced my fuel today because I was really nervous by half, so I can't perform. See, that's not a very smart thing to do. She says, oh, no, you don't understand. I vomit. I said, that's not good. I said, when you drive to the track with your parents, track and field runner, when you run at the lower meets and you run really well, what do you do in the car? Oh, I talk rubbish. Okay. And when you get to the track, to these lower meets, and you run really, really well, what do you do? Oh, I run around and talk to other kids. So when you go to the important meets and you run badly, what do you do in the car? I'm quiet. And what do you do when you get to the track? I don't talk to anybody. See, I've got this straight. When you talk rubbish in the car, run around at the track, you run well and don't vomit. When you're quiet in the car, quiet in the track, you run badly and you vomit. What do you think she do the next time? She's going to Queensland track meet the next day. So going to talk rubbish, run around. And what she said to the brain is, I want to perform. She got 3 gold medals. She was just as nervous. The nerves are not bad. The nerves are fuel. But the brain says, Master, when I give you fuel, I don't know if you want to perform or not. So I'm going to watch. And this takes us to the 3rd step. So pain is good. Whenever you feel pain, what you're doing is not working. So if I start feeling pain and talking to you right now, watching some of your faces, and I see you yawning or whatever, that's going to make me feel pain. But that's good, isn't it? It says, Phil, pick up your act. What you're presenting right now is not communicating. I can always do better because it's all about what I do, because absolutely everything that I do is my fault. How I feel is not. How I think is not. I don't have control of my thoughts. I don't have control over my emotions. I don't have control over my feelings. What I can control is my actions. Now, I almost never get depressed, angry, or jealous. Is that because I'm noble and moral? No, my wife will tell you absolutely not. It's because I don't act that way. I'm not a closet wuss. I'm an open wuss. I don't like feeling bad. So if I do more for you than you expected, that makes me feel good because you like me. If I don't insult you, you like me. If I don't stab you in the back, you like me. But if I do stab you in the back, you don't like me. And I like people to like me. In a sense, I'm getting my cake and eating it too because I'm totally selfish. I do all these things and people like me. And they think that's good. That's really great. I'm having my cake and eating it too. I had an equestrian come a few years ago. And she said, oh, at the bigger meets, I don't do really well. I said, what have you changed? She said, oh, at the lower meets, I make sure I walk the horse around. And she told me about 3 or 4 things she does. So what do you do at the really important meets? Well, I don't do that. I said, why? Well, because it's important. And I told her this story. Let's imagine, and you guys can see I'm in an office right now, and this office is rectangular. So let's imagine I put a plank from one side of the office to the other. And let's assume you're here. And I said, listen, I want you to walk the plank from one side to the other without touching the carpet. What percentage success rate you get? 100%, correct? It's dead easy. Now I put that plank 10 stories outside, plenty of light, but 10 stories over the road. I take a gun to your head, so if you don't walk, I'm going to shoot you dead. Now the same task suddenly became hard. Why? Because see, when you walked here, you looked up, leant forward, and went forward. Now when I did that, my computer was on. And what that means is, when I'm walking, don't think about it. So for example, if I tossed you a tennis ball to catch, dead easy. But you realize how complex it is? Angles, acceleration, deceleration, but it's dead easy. But if I say it's full of nitroglycerin and you drop it, you're going to die. Now, the first thing you're going to say is, I don't want to die. Now, if I say, don't think of an apple, what are you going to think of? An apple. If I'm saying to you, if you're saying to yourself, I don't want to ride badly, what are you thinking of? Riding badly. Does that make sense? So now what happens is the brain says, if you stick to plan A, I'll keep your computer on. But the moment you got scared, you leant back. Now, one of the key things we find in life is that when you lean towards your goal, your brain's on. So if I'm a cricketer and I'm leaning towards the boulder, my brain says you want to work. So the bat's high. And when the ball hits the bat, I don't see the ball hit the bat. I've hit it over here because I'm looking where it's going. But if I lean towards the keep, the brain says you're leaning away from your goal. You want to field. So once the ball hit the bat, I look for fielders. So when you're 10 stories up, what do? You lean back, look down, and you get scared. So the brain says, you want to fall, I can help you do that. Now, if my battery's dead, doesn't start my starter motor, doesn't get the prop shaft going, doesn't get the wheels going, what I can do is I push the car, which gets the prop shaft going, which starts the engine, I shouldn't have a clutch, and charges the battery. So the moment I leant forward, so even though I'm scared, I lean forward. Now, if you guys, where you're at, can everybody stand up? If you can't, I understand, but if you can stand up, can everybody stand up, please? Up, up, up. Okay, that's good. Don't worry if I can't see you all. Now, what I want you to be doing is, first I want you to be in what we call the depressed mode. In the depressed mode, you're on your heels, you shrug shoulders, and you're feeling depressed. Now, if I put a little finger on you, you'd fall over, wouldn't you? Because notice all your weight when you're depressed is not going forward. Now, we have a concept in sport called stance. Stance is when you put your non-dominant foot forward. Now, I'm right-footed, so my non-dominant foot's left. So when I put my left foot slightly forward, slightly wider. So can everybody put your non-dominant foot slightly forward? The reason for that is because I'm so right-handed, to get balance, my left foot has to be further to make it equal. So everybody put your non-dominant foot forward, wider. Now put the weight on the balls of your feet, lean forward and look up. Notice how you feel really good. Now, if somebody pushed you, you wouldn't fall over. All right, go back to Z, depressed. Look back. All right, back to A. Back to Z. Back to A. Back to Z. Back to A. Back to Z. Notice how different it is? Because what the brain says when you're forward, wants you to see. Okay, now you can sit down again. I'm going to get you up in a minute. Now, talking about catching ball, I want you to all imagine you're really scared catching that ball. When you get scared, your elbows come together. You become tense. All right? Now, can everybody get that tense, trying to catch the ball tense? Now, suddenly I want you to just open your arms like you're not tense and lean forward. Go like that. Can everybody do that? Notice how your brain says you can catch it? As soon as you did that. Now, I work with musicians. It's actually interesting. I worked with Anna, I'm studying the National Academy of Music. And the University of Melbourne did a study of my stuff. And they said, Phil, we're really, really surprised. Not that people you work with did better than people who didn't. But the performance anxiety was the same. See, they thought anxiety is bad. Why do you think your brain gives you anxiety at a bigger meet? Because it's more important, correct? If I'm a soldier and there's gunfire, should I have more emotion when there's no gunfire? Of course I should, right? The difference is, if I go like this, I'll get shot. If I hit the ground, I stay alive. So the brain always gives us more fuel. So now, let's imagine, again, back up if you can. Standing up again, please. Sorry, getting you active. Now, let's imagine I'm a clarinet player. Now, clarinet, for those who don't know, is a big black stick, okay? And I'm practicing in front of the mirror for 2 days' time to play at Carnegie Hall. Now, are the skills that I'm using from the mirror any different than the skills that I'll have in front of Carnegie Hall? No. Now, the difference is I have more fuel. Now, the brain always gives us more fuel when it's important. Now, you want that, don't you? The bigger the event you're in, do you want more fuel? Absolutely, you do. But the brain says, I watch the elbows and your hands. So if you stick into plan A, the brain says, even though it's more important, you want to keep performing. But if you get tense, so I want everybody to pretend you're going to Carnegie Hall, but you're really tense. Elbows tight, chin down. Can everybody do that? Now just put your non-dominant foot forward, open your elbows, loosen your hands. Notice how your brain says you can play clarinet, even though you can't. So what happens is when I work with actors, musicians, all these people, that equestrian rider did really well at her next meet, simply because she went back to plan A. I work with kids all the time, tennis, whatever. I say, kids, what do you do in the car, plan A? What do you do, Z? What do you do when you get there, plan A? What do you do, Z? I actually had a question person I was just talking the other day. I said, show me how you get on, how you go to the horse when you're feeling confident. And it's interesting, when she went, she leaned towards the saddle. All right? I said, what do you do when you're not confident? She leaned back. Now, you guys are in a sport that's unusual. Most of the sports I deal with, you may have teammates, but you don't have somebody who's part of you. Maybe people with car racing and motor racing have something, but you see, you have a living being. And that horse knows whether you're in A or Z. Now, it's up to you to act. You see, you can always act in A, can't you? You can't always act confidently. You can't always feel confident. So if you do that thing, I had a golfer, and he said, I get really nervous. I said, well, I notice when you lean over the bag, you feel confident. When you lean back, you're not confident. Had a cricketer said, when I lean up, go out to the middle, leaning forward, I feel good. When I don't, I feel bad. And so what the brain is always saying, if you lean back, so imagine everybody here, those who are riders, I want you to show me how you sit in the saddle. I know it's hard to equate this when you're feeling really confident. Can you all just sit when you're feeling confident? Get that feeling how you're feeling confident? Now, I want you to show me how you sit when you're not confident and you're anxious. Go back to A. Go back to Z. Go back to A. How long does that take? Milliseconds. Because the brain says, master, when you're riding, I don't know whether you want to succeed or fail. See, the moment it is 10 stories up, when you're leaning back, the brain says you want to fall. But if I lean forward and look ahead, now that my computer comes back on. Now, I'm sitting next to one of the computers in my office. It's a really good computer, but it's off. The last thing you want to do, especially the more experienced riders, is turn off the computer, because all those practices you've had, it said computer is on. I guarantee when you're riding well, you're never in the present. See, when I walk, I don't look here, I look there. I guarantee you're always ahead of yourself. That batsman was ahead of himself. See, when I'm speaking, I'm not thinking of the word that I am saying. Can't even do it. I'm ahead of myself. And so when your computer's on, you're ahead of yourself. I guarantee when you're not confident, when you're anxious, you're in the present. You're actually thinking how you're doing. I guarantee those who have jumping, when you jump, you're not actually thinking the jump, you're thinking about how you're going to finish the jump. Or you're thinking how you're going to ride. You're always ahead. Is that fair? I'm watching your faces. People are agreeing with me. And so what happens is positive doing says the brain says, master, when I give you more fuel, I don't know if you want to use the perform tap or the fail tap. The way the brain works it out, do you go to plan A or Z? Now the brain says, if you go to Z, that's understandable. I'll give you pain. And if you try to fix it, I'll help you get even better. But if you don't try to fix it, I'll help you self-sabotage. In other words, let's imagine, I say to you, listen, you're my 800-meter runner in the Olympics, and you're in the final. I said, listen, you got here using plan A. If you go to plan Z, the plan A, use plan A, you got 97% chance of getting gold tomorrow. But since it's really important, let's go to plan Z, which gives you 53%. What would you do with me as a coach? You'd fire me, wouldn't you? So now you know on that plank that when you lean forward and look up, you have a 97% chance of being successful and not falling. When you lean back, you got a 53% chance of living. Now, that sounds pretty stupid. When it doesn't matter, use plan A. When it's really important, go to Z. So that track and field runner, that girl I was talking about, what had happened was when it got pressure, she went to Z. So the brain says, okay, how can I stop you winning? I'll help you vomit. And so there's little things that people do. Now, I've been to 3 Olympics, multiple world championships, carried trophies around MCSCG. And what I found, the people who did really well weren't confident. They had lots of doubts, because the more important something is, aren't you going to doubt yourself? You know, people, the happiest day of their life, when they walk up the aisle, they have a lot of doubt. You've just bought the house that you're so happy to get, but you get doubt. That's part of life, isn't it? When something's important, there's always going to be doubt. But doubt doesn't mean you don't go ahead. And it's interesting, after the fact, they said, oh, I was super confident. But you see, you didn't have to be confident. You just had to act confidently. See, you don't care how I feel. You care how I present. And I can control how I present. I can't control how I feel. Now, there's a reverse of this too. Sometimes you don't know what your plan A is. I was riding my push bike down a hill near here called Settlement Road. And I was going about 55K down, because with my way, get to the other side. And a ute came by with extended mirrors, bumps the bike, and the bike starts wobbling. And I didn't want to die. And I must have leant back, because all my instincts said, slow down. Now, what's the worst thing you can do when you don't want to wobble? Slow down. Now, I've taught myself, whenever you're under the pump, if you don't know what A is, do the opposite. Because, see, the clarinet player wanted to lean back, could have leaned forward. Anyway, I sped up. And, of course, I lived. I was at the 2004 Olympics as a coordinating psychologist, but I wasn't working with this rower by the name of Sally Robbins. Now, Sally Robbins, 4 times before Athens, had stopped rowing in finals. And the people working with her said, listen, you got to be confident, whatever. And they said, if only you're calm, can you row well? Now, what are the odds of trying to 3 billion people worldwide being calm? Now, the other rowers in the boat were equally as nervous as she was, but they leant forward. But she got nervous, built up lactic acid, and she stopped rowing. Now, after the race, if you broke your wrist, what would you say to your teammates? Sorry, I let you down, right? Because innocent people always incriminate themselves. She said, it's not my fault. I got nervous, because she'd been taught that. If you get nervous, you can't perform. All that they said to her, listen, when you're nervous, lean forward, bring your elbows out. She wouldn't have built up the lactic acid, and she wouldn't have stopped. And so the idea is you have to feel good to act good is not true. But when you act good, it feels good. I was in Canada with my wife a few years ago. And we're walking on this path about near Whistler in the forest, about 10 kilometers off the bitumen road, 7 kilometers off the dirt road. And it's coming across the path about the width of this office. And 40 meters in front of me, suddenly saw this big black mama bear and her cub. Now, I must have got scared, because I must have leaned back. Now, when you lean back, the brain says you want to fail. So my first instinct said, run, which says, bear, get some exercise before you eat. The second instinct was scream. It says, bear, here's where your food is. The third instinct was freeze. It says, bear, you don't have to work for it. I had no idea what to do, but I've taught myself, whenever you don't feel good, go into stance. As soon as I went into stance, my brain said, sing. So I went, the hills are alive. And Mama Bear went, but Baby Bear kept coming with the sound of it. And Baby Bear went. And my wife said, how did you know to do that? I said, I didn't. Now, I found out later on that singing let the bear know it wasn't hostile. But I didn't know that. But see what the brain says, master, whenever you try to find a solution, I'll dig into the database that you're not even aware of and help you solve it. I guarantee that all of you here have had events where things went wrong, but you acted like it didn't matter and you solved it. Conversely, you've all had events where something you've dealt with many times, but you wished if only this hadn't happened, and you limped back and you stuffed it up. Is that a fair call? So basically, I had a couple girls from Bulgaria, weightlifters, ring me up one time. Said, oh, Dr. Phil, it's so hard lifting weights over here. I said, how'd the weights get heavier? They said, no, there are 30,000 people watching us. Are they holding them down? No. So what skills do you need in Bulgaria that you don't have a Chandler? Well, none. Said, how do you lift weights at Chandler when you lift your best? We smile and go quick. So what are you doing in Bulgaria? Well, the coach said to focus. Evil. Because where does your weight go when you focus? Unless you focus every time you ride, why would you focus when it's important? When I walked down here, I didn't focus on the board. I looked where I'm going. So why would I focus different? So I said, girls, what I want you to do is smile and go quick. They got PBs. Had this surfer come to me one time. We're ex-world champion. He said, oh, Dr. J, I get called all these different things. I was Dr. Phil long before that guy in America. Anyway, I said, Dr. J, I do really well in the heats and bad in the finals. Now, I'm a performance psychologist. My question is always the same. What did you change? He says, oh, in the heats, what I do is I just look to pick up the first board, go out, take the first wave. What do you do in the finals? I focus. Evil. He says, I check the boards out. Oh, you've turned the computer off before you get in the water. Then what else you change? Well, then I look at the opposition. So you don't take long strokes, take short strokes. Then I see if they do first. He says, got this straight. When you don't look at the board, don't look at the opposition, take first wave, you score high. When you do look at the board, do look at the opposition, don't take first wave, score low. And you want to score high. What do you think you do tomorrow? He said, go back to plan A. He won Bill's Beach. I had another surfer come to me one time. He said, oh, Dr. J, I get really scared surfing on Tahiti. He said, how do you surf? You're not scared. He says, like this. How do you surf? You are scared. Like this. I said, go like this. He said, that it? Yes. See, people make it too hard. And so what you do is, what do I do? So I guarantee you can tell your competitors when they're going to have a good race, a good ride or bad ride. Because you know what they do when they feel good, don't they? You know, and you get to see it. So now when I teach people, what do you do when you're driving to the event? I had one woman, a marathon runner, said, what do you do at breakfast on a good day? What do you do on a bad day? And this actually marathon runner is really interesting. She was running over in Amsterdam. And it was a really cold day. And somebody gave her the run. You know, you're supposed to have your own special person if you're an elite. And she wasn't, she's a mature athlete, but she wanted to get Olympic qualifying. I think it was 2:42 for women or something. And she didn't get it and she felt bad. She said, make sure I leant forward and made sure I put my, because when she's running on her hands with, she got 2:44 and it turned out she had a crack in her pelvis that big. And she still would do that because despite things going wrong, she said, what's my plan A? And so in your cases, everything you do when you ride well, you can do when you feel badly, correct? Now you'll still make mistakes. You'll still stuff up, all right? So that these are simple little things. So what I want to do is go through two stories before I throw over to question and answers. Two stories that people came to me, a performance psychologist, and everybody in this room, including the little ones I can see there in their jammies, they can all do what I'm doing. Yeah, that's you I'm watching. And you can all do it. Because let's first out, performance psychology has certain basics. Firstly, if you act badly, you'll get bad thoughts. If you don't want bad thoughts, don't act on them. Secondly, if you're getting pain, your brain's saying what you're doing is not working. Thirdly, when you get more emotion, that's made bigger. And when you get pain, if you try to fix it, the brain help you do weather, like me with the bear. Or if you don't try to fix it, self-sabotage. Understand the principles? So this lady came to me, 71-year-old. I remember thinking she was old at the time, but now I'm 72. So Anyway, that's another story. And I always tell people life's like being a roll of toilet paper. The closer you get to the end, the faster it goes. Or some people say life gives you the sheets. But anyway, the thing here is that I said, why are you here? She said, oh, I'm so lonely. My husband died 6 years ago. Now, she had an if only message, didn't she? If only my husband hadn't died, I'd be happy. What are the chances of that changing? I assume everybody watching me are competitive. What are the chances of you having doubt and anxiety, the more important the event? It's going to happen, isn't it? So the last thing I want to say, if only I didn't get that, because that'll stuff you up. So she said, my husband died 6 years ago and depressed. So that means for the last 6 years, she hasn't been fixing it. Now, remember the basic principle here. If you don't try to fix it, it's going to get worse. So for 6 years, she hasn't been trying to fix it. Now, I'll tell another story before finishing about her. I had this 11-year-old kid come to me, tennis player. I said, why are you here? He says, oh, I get angry on the tennis court. I said, why do you get angry on the tennis court? Because I'm playing badly. So how do you play when you get angry? Worse. So see if I got this straight. The way you fix it, when you're playing badly, you play worse. So you don't understand. I said, you're right. Sounds stupid to me. I'm a real galah when you speak to me. So I said to him, how do you stand when you're not angry? And he leant, and he was leaning forward, balanced. How do you stand when you're angry? Like this. So what do you think you do next time you get angry? Lean forward. Now, what are the odds of stopping an 11-year-old getting angry? You can't. 5 years later, he's in an elite training thing. I remember years ago being at a Davis Cup working with Pat Rafter and said that Tomic, Bernie, said, hey, Bernie, why do you throw your racket down? He says, I get angry. I said, what's the next point like when you throw the racket down? It's bad. So when you see the opponent throw the racket down, how do you feel? Good, because I'm winning. And I waited for him to understand. He didn't. Now, you would think the last thing you want to tell your opposition is you're in Z. Now, you can't control what's inside, but certain control what's outside, can't you? You can always act positively. Now, fortunately, when you act positively, the brain, like that guy who was waiting to feel romantic, decromantically, once he acted romantically, he felt romantic. Things changed. And he started feeling better. Now, getting back to this lady, she says, I hate myself. I said, why do you hate yourself? Well, I just sleep all the time. I said, let's see if I got this straight. Your problem is being lonely. And the way you're fixing it is sleeping all the time. I said, what do you think you should do? I said, I'm sorry, what were you doing when you were happy? What, before my husband died? Yeah, when you're happy. Well, I used to go to bingo all the time. Oh, good, bingo. And when you were sleeping all the time? Oh, I used to have the best Rose Garden retirement village. Let's see if I got this straight. When you go to bingo and Rose Garden, you're happy. When you don't go to bingo, don't go to Rose Garden, you're unhappy. And you came to me because you're unhappy, want to be happy. What do you think you should start doing? So go back to bingo? Hello? Now my office here is downstairs. Now, when she came down, she was leaning backwards. But when she went back, she's leaning forward. See, when people talk to me, I assume most of you right now are feeling better. Why? Because your brain says you're trying to fix things. You're trying to make it better. Anyway, a month later, and she was leaning forward and she left. A month later, her nephew rang up. What have you done, my auntie? She's reinvigorated, revitalized. She's at bingo every day and got the best Rose Garden retirement village. Now, what I did for her, could everybody in this audience do? If somebody comes to you and says, listen, I'm really down, all you have to do is, what do you change? I had this real estate agent a few years ago, a few months ago, came and said, oh, my life's spiraling out of control. I said, what's happened? Oh, my wife's left me. I said, okay. What were you doing when your life wasn't spiraling out of control? Oh, I go for a run in the morning before breakfast and have a nutritious breakfast. And then when I got to the office, the real estate office, I make sure I talk to 3 people and say, g'day, how you going? And then I make sure I make 3 phone calls. And even if I didn't have an appointment, within an hour, I get on the road and see some properties. So what are you doing now? He says, I'm not going for a run. I'm not having a nutritious breakfast, I might have a bit of hooch. And he said, when I get to the office, I don't talk to people. I'm not making the phone calls. I'm not getting on the road. Now, for those in sales, there's 3 rules of sales. Rule number 1 is see the people. Rule number 2 is see the people. Rule number 3 is see the people. He stopped seeing the people. Said, mate, go back to plan A. A week later, he says, I've gone back to plan A. and my life's feeling good. I'm making more sales, and my wife thinks I'm worth talking to again. See, what had happened was he was saying, if only things were better, rather than what I'm doing now is not working, go back to doing what was working. Now, as I said, what I did with that lady, what I did with real estate agent, everybody in this audience could do, correct? Even the little lass, all right? Everybody could do that. It's not hard, is it? I had a school, Marsden High School. The principal got me to talk to his kids because they used to have mates talk change. And what it meant was, if you're down, go to a mate and tell them you're down. But the problem is the mate didn't know what to say. Oh, you're down. That's no good. See, I've had people come to me. I've been depressed for 20 years. Now I get them over in an hour. But for 20 years, what's happened? Oh, I was depressed. So somebody give me drugs. Yeah, but what are you doing to fix it? Well, not because I have a condition. No, fix it. Like the lady who rang me up, Dr. Phil, I'm so depressed. I can't get out of bed. What should I do? And of course I said, get out of bed. See, the idea is when we're down, look at what we're doing rather than how we're feeling. And when you do what works, you feel better. And I like feeling better. That's why I always have a smile on my face, always telling these bad jokes and so forth. All right, the second story, I had a jockey come to me. And I said, why are you here? He said, oh, I've lost my confidence. I said, really? Confidence, confidence. Where did you go? You ever seen the confidence? Hello, confidence, confidence. No, it's not in here. Confidence. Where is it? Do you remember when you had it last? And he gave me the same look you guys are giving me. It doesn't exist, does it? Confidence. Can you see it? How much does it weigh? Actually, the Bangladeshi's got to me. I always said, what color is it? Oh, Dr. Phil, it's blue. But anyway, the thing about it is, it doesn't exist. So I said to him, what have you changed? Because if he's a professional jockey, he's got a plan A. You're not professional on plan A, correct? If you're at a big tournament, that's because you got the skills because you qualified to get there, correct? So you've got the skills. Now, we don't have time today, but I do profiles with people. Now, this is something I developed back in 1986 weighing Bennett for state of origin. And it's a really simple thing. I've now done about 40,000 of them. But one of the key things about it, it shows how we do things differently. Now, my wife and I are totally different. For example, I'm the sort of person, the later I get to the event, the less I think about it, the better I am. My wife is, the sooner she gets there, the more she thinks, the better she is. I'm the sort of person, the more information you give me, the worse I go. I'm big picture, I'm inductive. For example, you're trying, I wouldn't put this on, you're trying to get me to ride. Show me somebody riding well, then I work it back. With my wife, so this is how you get on the horse, is what you do. Different ways, deductive, inductive. I was inductive. The other thing is that, as I said, don't confuse me with facts. On game day, I have to rely on my instincts. Now, this rider was just like me. So I said, what if it changed? He says, when I ride well, I get to the track late, I talk rubbish. So what are you doing now? I get to the track early and I study form. Okay. What if you change? Oh, normally the trainer talks to me, I hardly listen. I just try to understand the big deal. I don't listen to his details. What are you doing now? I'm taking notes. So when you get there late, talk rubbish, hardly listen, what happens? You get on the horse. I lean forward. I was like the horse is riding me, and hands are loose. So what do you do when you get there early? Study form, take notes. Elbows are tight. Hands are tight. And I lose, and I lean back. So what do you want to do tomorrow? Go back to plan A. He rode 2 winners. About 6 months later, I was running this thing down in Sydney. And of course, you turn your phone off while you're talking. And at a break, in the lunch or something, I turned my phone on, and there's a message from him. So I rang. I said, mate, you rang me. He says, yeah, I thought I needed you, but I didn't. Just sound somebody to talk crud with. And I wrote a winner in a second. Now, what I did with him, could everybody here do? Basically, it's asking yourself, when I'm riding well, what do I do? And when I'm riding badly, what do I do? And you got to break it down. It could be in breakfasts in the morning. It could be when you arrive. Could be like that girl walking her horse or not walking her horse. It could be how you mount the horse. It could, thousands of things. But when you do that, what the brain says, because you've gone to A, you want to have the computer on. Because the last thing you want to, especially you get more and more skilled, you want the computer on because you want to see less. I guarantee when you act anxiously, non-confidently, you see more. Rather than just letting the jump take care of itself, you start thinking, what do I have to do? Because when you ride well, you don't think that. And I've dealt with a variety of question sports, polo, what's it called? Polo cross for horsing, lots of different sports. As I mentioned, jockeying, your sports, dressage, you name it. The thing is, look, it's all about people changing. Now, everybody's different. For example, my wife, when she had that girl go on the track, if she was talking in the car and ran around, she'd run badly. She's quiet. She's organized. Whereas I'm very verbal. She needs time to think about it. So we're all different. But you're the best coach. So what am I doing when it works? Now, just to wrap up before I throw the questions, and I'm supposed to go 45 minutes, gone longer, but it's not my fault, is this. Now, you don't have to be religious, but I quote a Bible verse, 1 Corinthians 10:13, that says this: there's no situation given us in life that is too difficult for us to handle, that in that situation, we always have the ability and resources to deal with it. So when Tim was in hospital, I had the ability to perform. When the bear was there, had the ability to perform. We always have the ability, maybe not to resolve it. For example, let's assume I get diagnosed with terminal cancer and only have 2 years to live. If I said, if only I don't have cancer, I'll probably die in a year. But I said, only if I do what? Can I make these next 2 years the best years of my life? I'll probably live 4, still die, but live 4. And so what I'm always saying is that matter whatever happens to us in life, don't say if only. Say, what's the best way for me to interact this? There's a lot of people now with the COVID-19, whatever, who've lost their jobs, can't do things. And if they're saying, if only COVID-19 hadn't happened, what chance of that changing? What they got to say is, only if I do what can I make things better? You know, you get a bad email, somebody's trolling you. Rather than saying, if only they hadn't said that, only if I do what can I make my reaction better? And so to wrap up, what I tell kids and everybody, you put up on your doors, you walk out of your room, and something very important, because this is what positive doers do. It says this: if it is to be, it's up to me. Thanks for listening to me. I throw it back to Kristen and questions on whatever.
Excellent. Thank you, Dr. Phil. Look, everybody, if you'd like to, if you're on the Zoom app, there's a reactions tab. You can actually, it's on the bottom. You can go and put your hand up there, or otherwise unmute yourself and ask questions. But I'll throw to the floor briefly if there's any particular questions from anybody.
Must be clear as mud. Has this been helpful, people, to you? Yes, hopefully. It's pretty simple. It's just common sense. No questions. Well, look, if you come up with questions later on, I'm sure you can pass it on to me and we can respond if you had time to think about it. Because some of the audience, a lot of it would be people thinkers, and I give you lots of new stuff, a brand new approach, and it takes you a while to process that. And I accept that. With me, if I say I'll think about it, I'm lying, because I deal with it at the moment. But somebody like my wife, she said, I need time to process this, think it through, and think, how do I fit into this? And that's fine as well.
So can you hear me?
Yes.
Ask a question?
Yep.
Hi, Dr. Phil.
Hello.
Hi. So both myself and Abby here, we had a pretty scary incident with our horse last week or the week before, different horses.
Yep.
And so we both were thinking we've lost our confidence. And I really liked that you can't see it. So where has it gone? What you're saying is we have the skills, we know what to do, so just go and do it.
Yeah, actually, being more confront, there's only 4 reasons why people fail. Number 1, they don't know what to do. But before the accident or the incident, you knew what to do. The second one is you don't know how to do it. The third one is you don't have the ability to do it. But the fourth one's a choice. Now, I find when these incidents happen, the first 3 haven't changed, have they?
No,
the
we know what
of riding, skills of horsemanship are no different after. Now, if the reason the incident happened that you needed better skills, by all means, you fix it. But I find almost always, especially in a question, it's usually something out of the left field. It wasn't that you were riding badly. It wasn't that you're doing something wrongly. And so what the case here, and of course, we all have heard this thing, get back in the saddle, is that make sure you go back to doing what was working for you. Yes, there's always a chance that a rabbit can run in front of the horse or whatever, something could happen. But again, the thing is walking the plank, if you're walking quickly fast, you may get a gust of wind, but so you still get there, things could still go wrong. So for your daughter and you, really important that you understand that your skills are the same, before and after the event. You still have those same skills. So what you want to do is after, not just on the horse, but as you're approaching the horse.
Right.
You're just driving to the event. So if the little lass there normally has a smile on her face, and I think she probably does when she's confident. Let me see that smile. There it is. Now, I guarantee when you're riding well, you smile, correct? Is that true? Yes. So when you had the incident, you didn't want to smile anymore, did you?
Nope.
So you've got to see, when you stop smiling, the brain says, oh, you want to even do worse. But you got to tell the brain, no, brain, I want to keep riding well. I want to make sure that I keep riding well so the chances are easier. I actually had a football or rugby union player years ago, a halfback, and he'd broken his shoulder twice. And he said to me, I'm really scared to tell you this, Phil, but I'm afraid of getting hurt. So that's pretty normal. You had 2 injuries. I said, but when you play really well, what do you do? He says, I tackle hard. What are you doing now? Tackling soft. I said, look, in sport, in contact sport, when 2 people eat each other equally, it's 50%, 50%. But if he goes at 25%, guess what? He gets hit by 75%. So you got to go hard. And John Conley was coaching, shows how long ago it was. He said, what have you done to this guy? He's tackling really hard. Well, the same thing is, if you start riding hesitantly, there's a bigger chance of incidents happening than if you go back to plan A with a smile on your face, doing those things that work for you. Because the skills required of good riding are the same before or after. I had a guy in cricket got hit in the face with a cricket ball, but that can happen. And he was going back incident. And they said, but when you do that, you have more chance of getting hit. So he got into practice with tennis balls, whatever. And he went back to batting the way he did, because when he went back to batting the way, there's still a chance of getting hit, but it was far less than he was going like this, elbows in. And that's the important thing in your riding. When you have an incident, don't change what's working for you, unless you did something really silly, like that was in the stirrup, or you didn't have, weren't sitting correctly. Well, then you fix that. But almost always I find in equestrian sports, when incidents happen, it was very rarely that the rider was doing something wrong. It was something that happened that can happen. You're in the world and things happen. And you just got to say, but what I'm doing is, if I stick to my plan A, the odds of bad things happening are far less than good things happening.
Yeah.
Is that helpful?
Very, very. When in our sport, when we're not feeling confident, we sit forward in a fetal position. And when you're confident, you should sit back. So a little bit.
What you'll find is when you're down here, you're not doing well. But what you'll actually find, even though you're sitting back, it's like you're pushing forward.
Yes.
Because you want to go forward. Yeah. And when you're in that fetal position, guess where your weight is? It's back in your coccyx back here, isn't it? All right. So it's almost like you're trying to get the horse to go backwards, which is not a good way to ride. That's not good. Elbows are together. But even when you're sitting, I guarantee when you're feeling really good and you're firm for aesthetic reasons, you're actually still forward a bit. And you'll actually find, even when you think you're straight, this is actually forward a little bit of your pelvis. Right. You can't help but do that. Because the brain says when you want to get somewhere, you'll naturally do that. I had a racing driver, he said, I'm strapped in. I can't move. So I actually feel where the weight is. And he actually said, when I feel good, I can feel the straps on my chest. When I feel bad, I feel the weight on the seat on my back. So it's subtle, very subtle. Now, fortunately, when your computer's on, you don't have to worry about it. That's why a lot of times you make sure it's not just when you get in the saddle you do it. It's all those little things leading up to it. You take advantage.
Very good. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
We've just got some comments down there. Dr. Phil, huge thanks, Dr. Phil, gained a lot. Looking forward to putting it into practice. Thank you, Dr. Phil. Great advice for life and sport. I love your energy, was from someone else. This has been great from both a riding perspective, but also a work perspective. I agree. Don't have a question, but I would like to thank Dr. Phil for a very informative and useful session. So
thanks, everybody.
Positive feedback there.
Didn't I say something?
Yeah, thanks, Equestrian Queensland, for organising.
I've got a question, Dr. Phil.
Yep.
I would love to ask you what would be some tips for riders to practice, you know, at home or in a more, like, I suppose, a more confident environment, some skills around, you know, how they can keep their A game? Maybe how do they increase some sort of pressure, but without, you know, I suppose going to the stage of like losing their A game?
What I try to tell people is it's really important that you practice Zen. So like I've been talking about, how do you ride when you feel bad? It's important that you experience, so you embrace that I'm now in Z. And your brain says, I don't like it. And so go to Z, A, like I gave you a few during the session. And same thing at home. If I'm having an argument with you at home, my first reaction is to make it worse, isn't it? Get up you, tell you I hate your guts, which is not a really good way. It's like teenagers. My parents treat me like a child. Well, I wonder why. They're acting like a child. And so it's really important for us to embrace when things at home aren't working. And I actually get people, especially in their sport, to practice Z. Now, it sounds horrible practicing making mistakes, but I want you to be aware of it. So I had a cricketer from Bangladesh. He said, oh, Dr. Finn, I get really nervous in nervous 90s and I get out. I said, how do you bat in the non-nervous 80s? Oh, Dr. Phil, I lean forward and I look up. I said, what do you do in between? Oh, I walk around. So now show me what you do in the nervous 90s. Oh, I lean back. That's lower. And the head's not down. What do you do in between balls? I don't move. So how does that feel leaning back? Bad. How's it feeling for? Good. So I said, why don't you keep practicing that at training and then go back to A every time we go to Z. Now, he actually had 3 centuries in the World Cup. He'd never scored one before because he thought if only I wasn't nervous in the 90s. Obviously, getting a century in cricket's important. But when he got nervous, he went to Z. But what had happened, he hadn't practiced being in Z when he was totally controlled, because it doesn't matter in the nets or you're riding just at home or someplace. It doesn't matter if you're in Z, but practice and go to A, because it's really important. Everybody here has different Zs. But once you embrace it, I actually have a lot of parents now when I've been working with kids, and they'll say, go back to A. I actually had a Wallaby he said, I had a really bad year in, I can't remember, 16, 17. And it talked about it. He said, the next year, whenever I made a mistake, I just went, A! Outstanding Wallaby of the year. Now, my point about that is, it was him embracing Z, and he practiced. So he knew it went down. I had another player tell me, oh, when I'm not playing well, a rugby league player, it was all-star test player. He said, oh, when I don't play well, my hands are lower. When I'm playing well, hands are higher. So I said, I want you to practice like this. How's it feel? Practice like this. So I actually got into practice Z. So I understood Z. And it was like a beacon in the night when he went to Z. And see, it's important that we do that. Or you watch a video of yourself if you can, and you see yourself in Z. See, I know I'm in Z when my hands aren't moving. You know, I've just got to be moving. One of the things I found it really hard, I had to say, if I'd been in a room with you, I've been walking all over the place, but it doesn't work for the camera. But even then, I had to keep moving my head around and so forth. So what I'm saying, my advice to any person is embrace your Z. You've had a lot of practice. So if my bones are out, I've been out for years, and I go to a chiropractor, and a very competent chiropractor, and he puts them back in alignment. My muscles are so used to being out, trying to pull them out. Or that guy that I said swore all his life had a lot of practice using inappropriate words for church. So it takes a while to practice it. Now, my point about that is it's important that you embrace your Z. That real estate agent had to embrace that how it felt when he wasn't talking to people, wasn't going for a run. And so all of us have an A and a Z in relationship. I had one guy a few years ago, he had a gold filling in his tooth. And when he played sport, I knew it was going well because you see a feeling because he's smiling. And he came and said, oh, my wife wants to leave me. I said, when's the last time she saw your smile? I said, what do you mean? When you're recording and she said she loved you, what were you doing? I smiled a lot, joked a lot. What are you doing now? Well, my sport's not going well and I come home. So I always ask people, if you're arrested on charges trying to be successful, with there enough evidence to convict you? And so I said to him, if you're arrested on charges of being in love with your wife, with there enough evidence to convict you? He said, no. So why should you want to stay with you when you're giving all the evidence that you don't love her? He said, show her the tooth. A week later, he says, the marriage is fixed. What had happened when you stopped doing the things that work, and what happens often in relationships and sport, you forgot what you did to get you the level you're at. Don't lose that. That's all good stuff. Keep doing that. That's why people say, I quit my sport, didn't enjoy it. But when they don't enjoy it, why are they getting pain? The brain says you stop doing what you did when you enjoyed it. So if you're not doing enjoyable acts, you don't want to enjoy your sport. It could be work, the same thing, in the office, whatever. And so when we always keep saying, only if I do what can I move on, we feel better. If we're saying, if only, we feel bad because the brain says you're not trying to fix it. Since you're not trying to fix it, we'll self-sabotage. Does that make sense?
It does. Yes, Naomi, we have been recording this, so everyone will get a copy of the recording.
You mean you're not going to remember everything I said once off? I'm hurt. No.
Any final questions from anybody?
I have a question.
Olivia.
And I don't know if I'm going to explain this right. And you did kind of touch on it with Tani a little bit. So, I mean, this has obviously been great and it's definitely making me think about it. And I know that when I go into competition, one of the first things I do is I just stop writing. And obviously that, you know, it makes it all go a bit pear-shaped and I get obviously quite nervous and I don't react in the best way. But when I get into a test, the problem is it's almost like I just really black out and I know that I stop writing and I know what I do. I just don't know how in the moment to shift from that A to Z. Like I don't know, sorry, from the Z to A, I don't know how to shift into thinking, okay, you need to ride more and you need to do this and this and this because I feel like I've gone past the point.
The thing is, it's like something rolling down a hill. You want to stop before it gets too much momentum. And so it's really important. But firstly, like you said, I really get nervous. Now that sounded like a bad thing. Now nerve's good. I really have a lot of fuel. So change that. I now have a lot of fuel. Now remember what the brain says when I give you fuel. Are you doing those things to help you succeed, plan A? Or are you doing things to help Z? So as soon as you start feeling nervous, say, that's good. I'm going to perform better today. But act confidently. Rather than say, well, I hope it doesn't get to me. I hope it doesn't get to me. And even as I'm saying in my role play, I'm finding my elbows coming closer, tensing back my neck, I'm leaning back. And so if I let it go too far, it's too hard. It's like in an argument. I make sure that I pull out of an argument long before it gets heated. Because when we've been yelling at each other, it's pretty hard to say, oh, stop. No, that's not A. It's really hard when you've gone that far to do that. But if you start at the very beginning, hang on, I think this is going where I don't want to be. And so embrace your nerves, but then ask yourself, all right, how can I make those nerves give me more fuel to do what I do when I'm doing well, rather than trying to fight the nerves? You want fuel. None of you want to ride in important events without fuel. Is that fair? And remember, your horse in your sport senses you have fuel and it gives the horse more fuel. Conversely, if the horse senses that you're self-sabotaging, the horse will want to self-sabotage. It's unbelievable how good psychologists horses are. They know the human psyche. It's unbelievable. The Freud should have been a horse. And so the moment you start acting negatively, you're telling your best mate to fail. And so you can override it. You can say, all right, I'm going to go to A, but you've got to start at the beginning. You're waiting too long. And but the other thing is, getting back to saying to Tani, is making sure that you know what your A is. So what are you doing when your computer's on and you're an A? And, you know, like the little one I was talking about, her smile. You know, some people it's a smile. Some people it's just being head up, chin up, you know, little things. Everybody does something different. I knew one person, they were just so organized, totally opposite to me. But they had to do A before B, before C, before D, and they had to follow that through, which got them in trouble sometimes, because sometimes in events you can't do that. I said, well, just make sure you go back to start at Q. All right, Q, and then the next letter, and they were structured. So, but they knew if I'm doing well, I'm following my structure. And you can start any time in that level. You don't have to start at A again. As I say, you just go to Q, S, T, and that's what you need to know. But I can't emphasize enough, be aware of what you are doing when it works, because that's what you can always control. Remember, you cannot control how you feel. Now, by you doing what works, you will start feeling better. So my basic rule is, you don't have to feel good to act good, but when you act good, it feels good. Is that helpful for you, Olivia?
Yeah, that actually was very eye-opening, that answer. That was good. I definitely just think I obviously need to be more aware of what works and shift my mindset a lot as well, and recognize that nerves are good.
Nerves are your ally. They're not your enemy.
Yeah, and more just how to utilize them, because as soon as I just go into a negative headspace, I just really don't know how to get out of it. So I just have to be more conscious. And
yeah, remember, don't ever worry about your headspace.
yeah,
Remember,
okay.
in the headspace, you can think in action space. What you're doing. You can always control your actions. Don't worry about your headspace. My headspace is often very bad.
Okay.
I don't worry about it because I can't control it, but I can always control what I do, which reboots my headspace, if you want to use that term. But I don't care. I don't wait for my headspace to be right. I just keep doing it. And it's amazing, before long, the computer's on and I don't worry about it anymore.
Yeah, I think that makes sense too, because I definitely overthink. So I think I just need to do it more often and don't think maybe as much and just do it.
It's like the Nike ad, just do it.
Yeah.
I have a question as well,
Yep.
if it's okay, and it's not getting too late. First, I'd like to thank you, Dr. Phil, for your infinite wisdom, and Equestrian Queensland for hosting such a lovely event this evening. My question is, I'm a person without a plan Z, so it's been quite a while since I've been riding and competing, so I can't quite remember a plan Z. So do you have any advice for people who don't have a plan Z?
Okay, you've obviously been listening to Sesame Street. I'm Zed. But anyway, the thing is, I said, remember I talked about the bear? That I wasn't sure what my Zed was, but I found out what I want to do when I'm under pressure, when I'm feeling pain, is always the wrong thing. So I guarantee that you may have forgotten what your Z or Z is, but you'll feel pain when you do it. Your brain's your ally. And as soon as you start feeling pain, say, okay, I'm feeling pain now. What am I wanting to do now? Don't do it. Do something else. It's just like I mentioned in a relationship. If I'm annoyed with somebody, I don't want to communicate. But how do you fix something if you don't communicate? And so I become aware what I'm trying to do is counterproductive rather than productive. So it doesn't matter if you can't remember your Z. Just experience when it doesn't feel good. Your brain, the slave, will say, Master, I'll always give you pain what you're doing. Now, if you keep acting painfully, I'll give you more pain, let you do. But since you're acting painfully, I know you want to self-sabotage. So you tell the brain, no, I don't want to self-sabotage. When I get pain, I'm trying to fix it. And even though you don't know what fix it is, by you trying to fix it, you actually get more successful. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you so much.
My pleasure. I've kept you guys going for too long. I don't mind. I can talk to the cows come home.
Any other questions? No. Look, thank Dr. Phil. If there are any other questions, I'm sure that if you'd like to send them through to the office, as Sam said, we've got the recording here as well. So again, thank you so much, Dr. Phil. I think the this opportunity to bring, as I said, 50 plus people of our members across a broad demographic here, it's been very valuable. So thank you again.
Thanks for having me, guys. Thanks for putting up with me.
Bye.
Thank you.
Have a good night, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Should take it.